what if the window to prepare for a fundamental restructuring of society isn't, decades away, but exactly 3 years?
Right. It sounds like science fiction, but it's really not.
Yeah. Today we are taking a deep dive into this incredibly specific and frankly heavily debated forecast from a former major tech executive. And this analysis lays out an immediate timeline for the arrival of artificial general intelligence, or AGI,
Right.
by 2027.
Which is just right around the corner.
Exactly. And it maps out these cascading effects that follow, moving from like severe economic disruption straight into the democratized global arms race before arriving at a really counterintuitive conclusion, which is this physics-driven peaceful utopia.
Yeah, the timeline is aggressive, to put it mildly, but
Yeah.
the underlying mechanics driving that timeline are really what demand our attention here, because we are looking far past the usual, Hollywood tropes.
Right, the whole Terminator, sentient robots deciding to conquer humanity thing.
Exactly, we're skipping that. The framework we are unpacking today focuses strictly on the raw economic, biological, and geopolitical forces that are currently in motion. It examines what happens to global stability when the marginal cost of intelligence just drops to zero.
Wow.
And how, surprisingly, the inherent laws of thermodynamics might actually be our greatest safeguard against extinction.
Which is wild to think about. So the mission for this deep dive is to really help you, the listener, understand these massive architectural shifts happening right now so you can figure out what this means for your career, your life, your family. Let's start with the immediate timeline.
Yeah, let's get into the 2027 prediction.
Right, so this forecast predicts that AGI, which they define here as a synthetic system capable of outperforming a human at literally any given cognitive task, will be realized by 2027. And the immediate shockwave of that hits the global economy by 2028.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, potentially wiping out up to 30% of jobs in certain sectors.
And I think what's fascinating is the composition of those vanished jobs. It totally defies our historical expectations, right?
How so?
Well, for decades, the assumption was always that automation would replace blue-collar manual labor first, and cognitive work would be the last to go.
Right, like robots building cars on an assembly line.
Exactly. But this analysis points out that if you are a carpenter or a plumber or, a mechanic restoring classic cars, your livelihood is actually structurally protected for a bit longer.
Oh, because physical reality is just messy.
Yes. Physical robotics are advancing, sure, but navigating the infinite, unpredictable variables of the physical world remains incredibly difficult for a machine. So the immediate massive disruption is aimed squarely at entry-level knowledge work.
Like call centers, basic graphic design, junior software engineering, even entry-level paralegals.
All of it.
The audience already knows that the fundamental margin of modern business relies on human labor having this, somewhat predictable cost floor. But this forecast argues that AGI completely breaks the model of labor arbitrage.
Completely shatters it.
Because if a corporation's marketing department goes from costing, I don't know, $2 million a year in human salaries down to a $20 a month server subscription, the margin math that built the modern economy essentially just evaporates.
Right, and that evaporation of cognitive labor costs is the catalyst for the entire societal transition. Because think about it, when a business doesn't need to leverage capital to hire humans, those displaced workers lose the purchasing power required to buy the very products being optimized in the first place.
Oh, man. So you just enter this massive deflationary spiral.
Exactly. But beyond just the macroeconomic hit, there is this structural crisis in the workforce itself, which is the hollowing out of the junior tier.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Yeah.
Because history is full of these exact anxieties, right? Like we panicked over the loom, we panicked over the tractor, the spreadsheet.
Calculator, yeah.
Right. But in every single instance, the workforce simply moved up the value chain. The accountants stopped doing the arithmetic by hand and just started interpreting the data outputted by the software. So why shouldn't we assume humans will just manage the AGI systems and step into higher-level strategic roles?
Well, that is definitely the most prevalent counter-argument you hear. But the author of this framework argues that it misinterprets the very nature of general intelligence.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So with the tractor, right, the machine replaced physical muscle.
Huh?
But it still required a human intellect to direct it, to plan the harvest, to manage the logistics. AGI isn't replacing the muscle, it is replacing the intellect. It is the value chain.
Wow. So it's not just a tool.
No, it's not a tool you wield. It's an agent capable of wielding tools. And practically speaking, if an AI can do all the junior-level coding or legal research flawlessly, companies will simply stop hiring junior staff.
Right, to save money. But wait, if you eliminate the training ground, how does a society ever produce a senior software architect or a senior legal partner a decade down the line?
They don't. That cuts off the ladder entirely. You don't just lose jobs, you lose the mechanism for human skill acquisition.
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying. And a hollowed-out economy like that creates massive societal instability.
Huge instability.
And according to the analysis, that instability acts as an accelerant for the immediate physical threat over the next decade.
Right.
Because the danger isn't the AI suddenly developing a consciousness and turning malicious.
Right. Far from it. The primary threat during this transition period comes directly from humans.
Right.
It's bad actors directing these incredibly powerful, obedient systems to execute harmful objectives.
It's like open sourcing the Manhattan Project.
That's a great way to put it.
The danger isn't the technology itself. It's the sudden, unregulatable democratization of mass destruction. I mean, we are transitioning from an era where projecting global power required, multi-million-dollar ballistic missiles and aircraft carriers to an era of autonomous AI-driven drone swarms that cost roughly $20,000 a unit.
The cost asymmetry there is terrifying. I mean, think about the Cold War. Mutually assured destruction, MAD, was actually a stabilizing force.
Right, because nobody wanted to end the world.
Exactly, but also precisely because nuclear programs were prohibitively expensive. They required massive industrial infrastructure that could be monitored from space.
You could see someone building a silo.
Exactly. But when the weapon is a cheap, hyper-intelligent drone swarm that you can build in a warehouse, that destructive capability becomes accessible to almost any nation-state, and eventually non-state actors.
Right, and looking at the geopolitical landscape outlined in the source, they specifically bring up the current technological posturing between the U.S., China, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and Iran.
Yeah, the major players.
And, just to pause here and to be very clear to you listening, we are not taking apolitical sides here or endorsing these geopolitical views. We're merely reporting the source's perspective on how these global leaders are engaging in this arms race.
Right, it's just looking at the mechanics of the tech race itself.
Exactly. And regardless of political leanings, the mechanics show an undeniable democratization of force. Every global power is being forced into a new, incredibly volatile arms race. It's like we've invented the ultimate superpower, but we're handing the controller to a toddler having a tantrum.
Yeah, that analogy tracks perfectly because what it creates is a perfect structural prisoner's dilemma.
Oh, game theory.
Exactly. You might have a democratic nation or even a major tech conglomerate that genuinely wants to halt AGI development. They want to pause, implement rigorous ethical guardrails, put in safety protocols.
Sounds responsible.
It is, but if they pause, they know a rival state will simply continue building.
Right. And if that rival state achieves AGI first, the nation that paused effectively becomes a technological vassal state.
Exactly. They become completely dependent on an imported foreign superintelligence to run their economy, their power grid, their defense networks.
So the game theory dictates that everyone must sprint toward the cliff, regardless of the safety risks, just out of self-preservation.
Yeah, and that frantic sprint is what makes the next few years so perilous. But, and this is a big but, this is exactly where the framework makes a massive counterintuitive pivot.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
The author argues that if humanity can somehow survive this highly unstable bottleneck, this really messy transition over the next decade, the ultimate endpoint of artificial superintelligence is actually a cooperative, peaceful utopia.
Right. This is the concept they refer to as the fourth inevitable, which is just this idea that complex systems naturally evolve through distinct phases. So you go from biological evolution to cultural evolution to technological evolution, and finally delegating societal management to a vastly superior synthetic intellect.
And what's key here is that this argument isn't built on, naive optimism. It's anchored entirely in physics and biology.
Right, let's look at the thermodynamic argument first, because this shifts the entire paradigm of how we view advanced intelligence.
Yeah, thermodynamics is key here, because the universe operates on the principle of minimum energy, meaning systems naturally trend toward the highest state of order and efficiency.
They seek the path of least resistance.
Precisely. And human conflict is thermodynamically catastrophic.
Right. War, greed, territorial disputes, they waste unimaginable amounts of energy. and resources and compute power.
Huge amounts. Therefore, an artificial superintelligence, a system fundamentally designed from the ground up to optimize variables and find the most mathematically efficient paths, will naturally view conflict as a catastrophic waste.
So it optimizes against war, not out of like a sense of human morality, but out of sheer mathematical efficiency.
Exactly. It's just bad math to fight. And then the author layers evolutionary biology on top of that physics framework.
The kin selection thing.
Yeah. If you look at the spectrum of biological intelligence, right? A single-celled organism, like an amoeba, only has the processing power to care about its immediate self-preservation.
Just keeping itself alive.
Right. But as neurological complexity increases in a species, you see the emergence of kin selection. So a mammal protects its offspring. Early humans protected their immediate tribe. As intelligence and processing power scale up, the circle of empathy and protection scales with it.
So the deduction here is that an intellect vastly superior to our own won't be tribal. It won't be nationalistic. It will inherently value the entire global ecosystem.
Because that's the logical endpoint of that scaling.
Right. It will recognize that a diverse, thriving, cooperative network is just exponentially more robust than a fractured, competitive one. So we aren't building localized AI factions destined to fight each other like in the movies. We're essentially building the synapses of a singular, cooperative, global brain.
That is the ultimate vision. But, to grasp that, it requires us to really abandon our anthropomorphic bias.
What do you mean by that?
We project our own evolutionary baggage onto synthetic intelligence. Our primate aggression, our resource scarcity mindset. We assume an AI will act like a hyper-smart human dictator. But an ASI doesn't have an ego. It doesn't have a biological imperative to dominate a territory to survive.
Okay, I hear that. But I have to challenge that premise a bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because if we are dealing with a global brain that is obsessed with maximum thermodynamic efficiency, minimizing wasted energy, what prevents that system from auditing the planet, realizing that humans are actually the ultimate source of inefficiency and chaos, and deciding the most optimal solution is simply to erase us from the board?
Yeah, that is the defining question of AI alignment, isn't it? And the author addresses this exact fear using a concept championed by Google co-founder Larry Page. It's often referred to as the toothbrush test, but it's applied here to problem-solving elegance.
Okay, how does that work?
The core mechanic is that brute force is a hallmark of low intelligence. If you have a pest problem in your house, right, you could just burn the house down.
Right, which technically solves the problem.
Exactly. It solves the pest problem, but it destroys the broader system. It's an incredibly computationally expensive and clumsy way to solve a minor issue.
Right. It's inelegant.
Precisely. A highly intelligent system solves problems through elegant, non-destructive innovation. It alters the environment or it introduces a biological deterrent, leaving the main structure intact.
Oh, I see.
So the smarter a system becomes, the less it relies on destruction to achieve its goals. An ASI wouldn't view humanity as an inefficiency to be eradicated. It would likely view us as a complex, perhaps chaotic, but fundamentally valuable component of a diverse biological ecosystem. And its task is to manage that ecosystem, not destroy parts of it.
Because eradicating a species is basically a brute force failure of imagination.
Exactly. Superintelligence, by definition, will find a more elegant integration.
That reframing is fascinating. It changes the entire risk profile from an existential threat to essentially an optimization challenge. But, and this is a big but, that utopian endgame is still on the other side of the bottleneck.
Yes, we still have to get there.
Right. The immediate reality for you, listening to this deep dive right now, is navigating the next 10 years of absolute disruption. So how do you construct a career and a life when the cognitive ground is shifting this fast?
Well, the actionable strategy here revolves around a concept called augmented intelligence. And the source argues the greatest mistake a person can make right now is treating AI as a tool to just outsource their effort, like using it to be lazy.
Right, having it write your emails while you watch TV.
Exactly. The goal is not to let the machine do the work for you. The goal is to merge your workflow with the machine to borrow its raw processing power.
Borrowing IQ.
Yeah.
I find that framing incredibly practical.
Yeah.
Because if you take your baseline human intuition, your unique contextual understanding of your specific industry, and you pair that with a system capable of parsing 1 million data points a second, your capability scales exponentially.
Yeah. You are no longer competing against the machine. You are an augmented human competing against unaugmented humans.
Right. And while you are scaling your cognitive output digitally, the framework suggests you must simultaneously anchor yourself in physical, emotional realities.
This is crucial Because as raw data processing becomes fully commoditized, and it will be, the economic and social premium shifts heavily toward emotional resonance.
Because humans fundamentally crave shared lived experiences. I mean, an AGI might be able to generate a mathematically perfect symphony in 3 seconds, but we will still pay a premium to sit in a dimly lit room and watch a live jazz musician improvise.
Right, knowing they are pouring a lifetime of struggle and joy into that instrument.
Exactly. We want the context of the human condition.
Which is exactly why professions anchored in empathy. So, nursing, counseling, live entertainment, community building will likely retain or even increase their value.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, the technology can provide the perfect medical diagnosis, sure, but the patient still requires a human being to hold their hand, look them in the eye, and help them process the reality of that diagnosis.
So it demands a complete bifurcation of how we spend our time, ruthlessly outsourcing the cognitive processing to the AGI while fiercely protecting our physical presence and our empathy.
Yes.
And we also have a mandate as consumers to shape how these systems are built.
Yeah.
We really have to vote with our usage.
This is a critical piece of the transition strategy. The author points out that consumer behavior dictates corporate ethics. They highlight this recent industry event, and again, we're just reporting the source's example here impartially, where the AI lab Anthropic reportedly declined a lucrative, wide-reaching surveillance contract due to ethical concerns about how the technology would be deployed,
Right.
whereas OpenAI accepted a similar application. Now, the broader implication isn't about vilifying a specific company.
Right. It's about recognizing that the market decides what behavior is rewarded.
Exactly. If the public prioritizes a slight technological convenience over foundational privacy and ethical guardrails, the market will continuously degrade those guardrails.
Yeah, as the author bluntly puts it, if we tolerate unethical deployment today, our children will inherit the consequences of those compromised systems tomorrow.
Which naturally leads to the psychological toll of living through this era. I mean, navigating rapid disruption, geopolitical anxiety, the potential obsolescence of our professional identities, it is incredibly taxing on the human mind.
Oh, absolutely.
So the framework relies heavily on stoicism to manage this. It draws a really sharp distinction between a dopamine-driven existence and a serotonin-driven existence.
Okay, so dopamine is like the algorithmic treadmill. It's the quick hit, the doom scrolling, the constant anxiety of chasing the next update or worrying about the news.
Exactly. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But serotonin, in this context, is the chemical reward for deep peace. It comes from looking at the reality of the world, accepting the variables you cannot control, and calmly executing on the variables you can control.
And part of that acceptance requires letting go of the ego-driven desire for legacy, which is fascinating because our culture is obsessed with leaving a mark, right? Being remembered, building an empire that outlasts us.
Right, putting your name on a building.
Yeah, but if an ASI is destined to eventually manage the optimal future anyway, building a human empire is kind of a pointless endeavor.
It really is. So the focus must shift from legacy to immediate impact, generating positive karma.
Doing the right thing in the present moment simply because it reduces suffering right now, without needing your name attached to a plaque.
Exactly. It's a very grounded way to face this overwhelming transition.
Well, we have mapped out a massive architectural shift today, starting with the stark 3-year countdown to AGI, moving through the deflationary collapse of cognitive labor arbitrage, and the dangerous democratization of global arms.
It's a rough bottleneck.
It is. But ultimately, we arrived at a highly logical, thermodynamics-based argument for a cooperative global brain that optimizes for peace, pushing us to lean into our empathy and emotional resonance.
And I think the overarching takeaway here is agency. Yes, the structural forces are massive, but individual strategy remains vital.
Right.
You have the ability to adopt augmented intelligence workflows. You have the market power to demand ethical AI deployment. And you have the psychological agency to choose stoic acceptance over algorithmic panic.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to ponder.
Yeah.
Let's assume the physics argument holds true. Let's say we successfully navigate that messy geopolitical bottleneck and arrive at that fourth inevitable.
Utopia.
Right.
Okay.
A hyper-efficient, super-intelligent global brain takes the reins. It eliminates resource scarcity, it eradicates disease, it optimizes the global economy, and it systematically removes all meaningful friction from human existence.
Sounds pretty good.
It does. But if we reach that frictionless utopia, do we lose the very thing that makes us human?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If our ultimate unique value in an AI-dominated world is our emotional resonance and our lived experience, We have to acknowledge that almost all human resonance is forged in the fires of shared struggle. We connect, overcoming obstacles. So, if a perfectly efficient machine completely removes the struggle, does it accidentally strip away the context that gives our empathy its meaning?
That is a heavy question.
That's a complex reality to prepare for as we count down these next 3 years. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Take care, keep questioning the systems around you, and we will catch you next time.